Good afternoon, and I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join me today as we provide knowledge and information to nonprofits that have faced difficulties in assessing basically COVID-19 related public and private funding. I'm Assemblymember Shirley, representing the 79th. And so many of you joined us about a month ago. And so we were very grateful for that. We had a town hall meeting for the nonprofits. A lot of questions were asked, a lot of uncertainty was there. And we found it necessary to talk about those things and to work with the Nonprofit Institute so that we could begin to answer some of the questions. And so we decided at that point that there was a need for part two. Before we go any further with this town hall, I want to first of all express my personal and my staff's condolences to the family of George Floyd and the activities that are occurring in Minnesota. We would be remiss in all of our activities if we didn't acknowledge that there are some truly difficult challenges being faced in that state and the surrounding states as well. And so our prayers and thoughts are with them as they deal with this issue. It's amazing that my staff reminded me, and the governor called me today, that it was 1 year ago today that we passed AB 392 about lethal force being used by law enforcement and making that force hopefully not greater than the incident itself that was occurring. So it was a year ago that we passed the bill in the Assembly that set the tone for it to move to the Senate and eventually signature by the governor. So there are a lot of things happening, and so we want to be conscious of that and not pretend that this is a perfect situation. We know we have challenges, not only with this virus, but challenges in relationships across the nation. So I want to make sure that the Floyd family knows that they have my staff and my condolences, as well as the condolences of the California Legislative Black Caucus. So with that, we're going to move into our Nonprofit Institute of San Diego and I want to thank them for their partnership with this. They have been great partners in working with my staff and providing resources and information to communities. And they've done some work and some research and to get some findings as to what our nonprofits are saying and the things that they need so badly. And so with that today, we have with us Dr. Emily Young, who's Executive Director of the Nonprofit Institute of the University of San Diego. Dr. Young and her team have spent countless hours gathering cohesive data specifically on the effects of the coronavirus pandemic that has had and what it has had on our nonprofit communities. And it's a privilege to have her on with us today on this town hall. And so, Dr. Young, I want to turn it over to you. We're very excited about what you have to tell us and very excited about your partnership. Thanks so very much.
Well, thank you, Assemblywoman Dr. Weber. And we are really honored to have this opportunity to partner with you and your team in hosting this webinar. And at the Nonprofit Institute, we aim to provide critical data as well as equitable access to capacity building and technical assistance to support our essential nonprofit workforce, both leaders and organizations that provide our community safety net and enhance our quality of life in the San Diego region. And we do work with hundreds of nonprofit leaders and organizations serving the San Diego region and have developed special programs for smaller neighborhood-based organizations, many of which are on this call today. Currently, we're conducting ongoing surveys of nonprofit leaders in light of COVID-19, and here are some of the things that we are finding. One is that nonprofits are grappling with the systemic inequities in our region and others across the country that have been laid bare with this pandemic, as low-wage communities and communities of colors have felt the disproportionate impacts of this unfolding public health and economic crisis. And of course, our nonprofit community is not immune to the coronavirus. While demand for services is rising across the board, across sectors, nonprofit organizations are facing unprecedented disruptions with a sharp decline in revenues, particularly in fee-for-service income that is the lifeblood of many organizations, as well as in individual donations. And among those organizations, nonprofit organizations that applied for PPP in particular, larger nonprofit organizations were 3 times more successful in obtaining funds from the PPP than those smaller neighborhood organizations. Revenue declines in physical distancing restrictions have forced a hollowing out of this essential nonprofit workforce with a growing number of staff furloughs and layoffs, over half of those surveyed in our last nonprofit survey did indicate that they had made cuts and they plan to make further cuts in their staffing. And nonprofits, in spite of all this, are responding to new demands and challenges by shifting programs online, working remotely, and we're finding a lot of organizations that are finding ways to collaborate in new ways to leverage the resources and capacity that they have in order to meet the needs of our community. Beyond needing essential financial support, which I know a number of our panelists are going to be talking about today, we've also found that nonprofits need assistance with reevaluating their fundraising strategies, financial scenario planning, and managing the stress and anxiety both of their own teams and staff, as well as their clients. And in response to that, I did want to say that the Nonprofit Institute has developed a nonprofit crisis capacity and resilience program to sustain the health and vitality of our essential nonprofit sector that's working on the front lines to meet critical and immediate needs, particularly of vulnerable populations, especially those disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And to help these frontline nonprofit organizations, we are doing a number of things, including conducting these ongoing surveys that I just mentioned. We have a partnership with the San Diego and Imperial SBDC network at Southwestern College, and I know Danny Fitzgerald is on the phone, working in partnership with them to help nonprofits not only apply for, but report on that federal cash assistance and loan assistance from the federal government. Resilience-based coaching to provide trauma-informed coaching that enhances nonprofit leaders' capacity to gain greater resilience at this time of crisis. And then Fortify webinar series, as well as that has been co-hosted with the Fieldstone Leadership Network San Diego, as well as a nonprofit Academy and Accelerator program that aims to provide capacity building and coaching for community-based nonprofits, with a focus on organizations serving in the Promise Zone and other vulnerable neighborhoods. So we're really delighted to be with all of you today, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Weber and the panelists.
Dr. Young, thank you very much for being here, and we're excited to obviously meet the 5 panelists who are here, who are experts in this field, and we want to get their perspective on what can possibly be done to help those who are struggling with their nonprofits and to explain those kinds of things that are important. So we have a number of folks who are here and 5 panelists, particularly in the nonprofit sector. And so we want to make sure that that they get an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us who they are very briefly, and then we're going to go into some questions that were some of the common questions that have come out of the survey, as well as other kinds of interactions we've had to make sure that we get the correct information. So our panelists today, there are 5 of them who are experts. Our first panelist is Jacob Richards from the California Bank and Trust. Jacob, could you briefly just tell us in a minute a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jacob Richards. I'm a Senior Vice President over at California Bank and Trust. I specialize in working with large, medium, small nonprofits across San Diego County. It's an expertise that I have. In addition to that, also I serve on the board and chair the Finance Committee for United Way of San Diego, and I also serve on the policy board for the San Diego Workforce Partnership. So I'm heavily involved in the nonprofit community outside of my job. I'm also an expert in the payroll protection program, which I imagine many of you have applied for, and even going through the forgiveness piece right now. So I look forward to answering your questions and helping you as much as I can through these difficult times.
Thank you. Our next person is Todd Lane from the California Coast Credit Union. Todd.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. My name is Todd Lane. I'm the president and CEO of California Coast Credit Union. California Coast Credit Union is a credit union which is a 501(c)(1) organization based here in San Diego. We have 26 branches in San Diego County and Riverside County, approximately 200,000 members. And a member for a credit union can be a small business, a nonprofit, or a consumer. So we do both consumer lending and consumer deposit activities, as well as small business activities, including lending. We're involved with PPP as well. And thank you for having me. the nonprofits are very near and dear to my heart. My wife runs a very, very small nonprofit here in town called the Thumbprint Project Foundation. We actually met serving on a foundation board many years ago. I also serve on the board of the Neighborhood House Association, great organization here in town. Also on the San Diego State Alumni Association board, and several other small nonprofit organizations. So again, thank you for having me, and thank you for including credit unions. Oftentimes credit unions aren't thought of in terms of serving small businesses and nonprofits, but we indeed do. San Diego is very much a credit union town. There are wonderful community banks here, but there's also wonderful credit unions. So again, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for that. I'm a credit union person, so they hold most of my money. So we always want to include you in the conversation. Next, we have Danny Fitzgerald from the San Diego Small Business Development Center. Hi, Danny.
Hi there, Dr. Weber. Good to see you again. Good to be part of this, and I appreciate the invitation. As Dr. Young talked about, we're the San Diego Imperial Small Business Development Center. We're a resource partner of the Small Business Administration, as well as the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We're here, our primary mission is, of course, to help for-profit businesses, but certainly in these times, we recognize that nonprofits are also small businesses in their own right, and have been here to be able to assist them as well. Recognizing that early on, we partnered with the Nonprofit Institute. Dr. Young and her team trained them up on the technical assistance to be able to apply for the capital programs, and now are even also doing a lot of different types of trainings for the nonprofits themselves as they're adapting and reopening. But not only that, we're certainly here for the folks that are in your communities that are business owners, the micro businesses, those that maybe don't have access to technology or resources, or even be able to put together their finances to be able to apply for these. That's really what we're here to be able to do, to assist both you, the nonprofits, but also the small businesses in your community. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for all your hard work. Now we have Robert Villarreal from CDC Small Business Finance.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. We appreciate it, and it's good to be on a panel with a number of people that we're partnered with. So I'm with CDC Small Business Finance. We're a 42-year-old organization. We're a nonprofit ourselves. We're a C4, and we're headquartered in San Diego, California, actually in Liberty Station, and we have 7 offices across the state of California. We are a small business lender, primarily an SBA small business lender. In our 42-year history, we've done nearly $19 billion in project funding across the state of California and some other states. The last couple of months, we've been consumed, like some of my lending partners, with the PPP. We did so far we've done about 3,000 loans for $145 million. About 80% of those loans have been in California. The other across maybe 30 or 32 other states. And we've done a handful of nonprofits with million dollars. I also sit on a number of nonprofits, and I sit on a local, a state, and a national nonprofit, and all 3 were recipients of a PPP loan. And the last thing I'll say is I agree what Dr. Young said. Dr. Young said at the kickoff that COVID has exposed a lot of the inequality and inequities in our society. And the way we're looking at it as a corporation is we're in relief mode. We're going to move to a recovery mode. But we want this to be also a transformational mode. We want to transform the way at least the California economy works for communities of color and for low to moderate income individuals. So we're really doing a lot of policy and advocacy work in trying to achieve that. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Weber.
you, and that's good to hear, because that's kind of what we've been echoing at the Capitol, that in our recovery, we don't want to come back as we were, we want to come back better. And because where we were left a lot of people behind, and it was accented during this pandemic, the poverty and the small businesses were struggling. And that became real clear as we talked about how do we recover, and we have to recover better than where we were before. Thank you so much. Our last, but surely not least, is Mark Stuart, who was at the San Diego Foundation. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks so much, Dr. Weber, and thank you for remembering George Floyd and for assembling us all together this afternoon. So I'm the president and CEO of the San Diego Foundation. I've been in my role now, this is my 13th month. And on March 12th or 13th, we stopped all of our regular business to focus on COVID-19 Community Response Fund and this effort. And so to date, we've raised more than $16 million for this fund. We've pushed out more than $11 million to over 100 organizations, some that are very mainstream and well-known, like Feeding San Diego and the Jacobs and Cushman Food Bank, but then also to many, many much smaller nonprofit organizations that do work directly with disproportionately affected populations that are either culturally or ethnically based. And so we've hit every corner of our county and really made sure that we can get those dollars out where they need to be. We've also established the San Diego County COVID-19 Small Business and Nonprofit Loan Program. And the county has added $5 million to that. The San Diego Foundation has added $5 million to that. And we're reaching out to many municipalities and other investors to join us. The great thing is that thanks to Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, ours is the most unique partnership in the state, and that it involves List San Diego, ASEON, the Small Business Development Center, California Southern Bank, and other partners. And so that any organization or municipality that adds dollars to this loan program will qualify for the state's 95% guarantee on loan fulfillment. And so we've just now signed our documents with the county and are ready to go, and we'll be making loans very, very soon.
Sounds great. Sounds exciting. I'm sure those who are listening, we have over 100 participants on this call, are eager to hear a lot more about that as well. Want to go to our questions. We have some generic questions, and feel free, any of you, to chime in. If you want to use your hand thing that's in the chat box, you can. If not, if you just use your hands like this, I'll see it as quickly as I see the chat box. So wanted to ask some of the questions, and we're going to do this for a while, and then obviously we're going to break off into groups. But what funding is, people ask me this all the time, what funding is currently available to nonprofits right now on the federal level or the state level? What is available? People are oftentimes confused about, what remains for folks to be able to apply for. So anyone have any ideas concerning that? Danny raised his hand. Okay, great, Danny. Yes.
Well, and we have some great lenders that are on here that can talk about it, but PPP is still available for you, those that are 501c3s. There are still funds available. And so if you have not applied for a PPP, you can work with us. We have our team that's also there with Dr. Young in the breakout room, myself, and one of her graduate students that basically is our nonprofit SBDC advisor, can certainly work with you. And I'll let some of the lenders talk about what they're still doing for some of the nonprofits, because they've all done a great job. I know the lenders we have on here for PPP have done some great work.
Yes, Todd.
Yeah, Dr. Weber, I would just echo that. There are some $80 to $100 billion left in PPP funds. And there's, many credit unions in town that are doing the PPP lending. California Coast, my credit union, North Island Credit Union, very good credit union in town, and Self-Help Credit Union, Self-Help Federal Credit Union. They are a community development financial institution, so a CDFI, and they work with lots of small businesses, lots of nonprofits, and they can help you out as well. So lots of money left. My recommendation, though, is to the small businesses and the nonprofits, is to establish several banking relationships, not just one in town. I think that's something that we run into quite often, is where they're doing all of their business with one banking entity. And then if that banking entity doesn't provide PPP lending or SBA lending or EIDL lending, then they run into a wall. And so I would just recommend you develop many, many relationships.
Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Yeah. This is Jacob. Yeah, I'd just like to add.
Jacob, yes.
Yeah, we, at the bank, we've done, billions in the PPP funds, and I mirror some of the comments that Danny and Todd just said. There's plenty of funds left and available right now, and the application process is a lot quicker than it was in the beginning. But just one comment that I'd like to add is, because I know a lot of people out there might be seeing some information on the Main Street Lending Program, another program that's coming out from the government. You know, at some point, hopefully they'll allow nonprofits into the program, but currently that program does not allow for nonprofits, mainly because one of the reasons they calculate the loan amount is based on EBITDA or cash flow, and some nonprofits aren't structurally set up like that. But that is a program that, you know, to keep your eye on, that could come out in the future. We'll make some adjustments for nonprofits can get some of those available funds.
Okay, Robert?
So yeah, echo everybody. We think the PPP is a very good program. There's going to be some modifications to it. People heard that the House passed a bill yesterday to change it from a 75-25 payroll, non-payroll to a 60-40. The Senate will take something up. I don't think it'll end up looking like that, but we'll have something probably in about 10 days to 2 weeks, which would be if you started your PPP in the next few days, right when you're getting funded, you would be under those new guidelines, and I think they're going to be a lot more flexible. There's the other SBA loan called EIDL, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. Right now, just agricultural businesses are eligible for that, but if that opens up, nonprofits were made eligible for that. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the SBA website. On the state side, the governor allocated $50 million to the iBank into the small business program, and that's the one that, you know, Mark mentioned earlier in the county. They're going to work with Cal Southern, which is a partner entity of ours. We're the administrator of that, and they're going to provide a guarantee on that. So that's going to be leveraged 2 to 1. So if you're and nonprofits are eligible for that. So if you're a nonprofit and you have a lender that can participate in that program, that lender for loans under $50,000 can get a 95% guarantee. And then in the governor's May revised budget, he has an additional $50 million to go to that. So there'll be lots of monies available for guarantees for those lenders that participate, and a lot of the nonprofit lenders like us and Acción and others participate in that program. And I know Cal Bank and Trust to some extent also participates in that program.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Also want to ask, what other types of philanthropic organizations are those? Look for those so that nonprofits should be looking for support to any philanthropic organizations in terms of them doing anything to help the smaller nonprofits. Does anybody know if any of our philanthropic groups are doing anything? I think, Mark, you talked about it briefly. Yes. Mark?
Yeah, so Dr. Weber, I'd say.
Mark, okay, Mark? I think Mark is kind of frozen.
Hopefully that's better. But Dr. Weber, what I would share is that the San Diego Foundation is not alone in San Diego County in providing resources for nonprofit organizations. The Jewish Community Foundation of San Diego, the Rancho Santa Fe Foundation, the Leech Tag Foundation, Coastal Community, we've all have been doing as much as we can to push dollars out into the community for nonprofits. For us at the San Diego Foundation, our focus has been on food security, essential living expenses, and other emergent needs, such as learning devices to help kids get connected to the internet, medical supplies, and as well as childcare for first responders and healthcare workers. We're really keeping our dollars focused to those specific needs. And so if there are nonprofits who are seeing that they're able to do work in those capacities, please have them go on to our website and make an application.
Okay. What type of financial strategies are you currently recommending to nonprofits during this, over the last 2 months? What are some of the financial strategies are you recommending that they do to stay afloat?
This is Jacob. I could comment on just a financial strategy I'm seeing in regards of how nonprofits are handling the PPP funds and the documentation piece on there. So one of the things a lot of the nonprofits that I work with are doing, because we're going into the forgiveness phase, is that they are going through and separating out on the balance sheet, for instance, the cash piece, and putting a PPP cash line on there to separate it from the other funds in the organization. In addition, when you go into the income statement, they're creating specific lines for the PPP expenses that occur throughout the covered period. So that's one financial strategy that I'm seeing nonprofits do, specifically in regards to PPP, and I think it'll be very helpful when that forgiveness phase comes around.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I think it's similar to what we've been talking about with small businesses, is to do take this time to do a deep dive into your finances and what are your core functions that you're going to need. I know nonprofits are used to operating lean and mean. Unfortunately, now it's even leaner and meaner. But really do take a deep dive into that for some of those operations. In terms of things for PPP, I think nonprofits have an advantage actually over small businesses, because PPP functions more like fund accounting as opposed to traditional cash accounting. And it is a bit easier to kind of explain some of the separate tracking, but it really does, take a look at what your core operations are, communicate with your board in terms of what they're doing in some of your fundraising, communicate with your primary funders for your nonprofit, see what they're doing. Some funders from a philanthropic side are certainly looking at speeding up some donations, and really be able to take a look at that. So similar to what we're telling business owners, from looking at things from what their receivables are, what their core operations are, what's going to get them a return on investment. I think it's again with nonprofits, be able to maximize the limited resources that you do have and take a look at how you can really focus in on your core mission and best be able to achieve that.
Okay. Beyond laying off staff, which I know many nonprofits have had to do, furlough a number of people, what strategies have been helpful, to increase revenue and decrease costs during this period, other than laying off staff? Danny?
So I'll go again on that. I think some of the other ones are, is in terms of, minimizing some of your other primary operating expenses, working with your landlord if you're renting any types of facilities, to be able to look at that. Even if you have the facility, be able to work with, to be able to, if you own it, talk to the lender, be able to defer any of those types of payments. I know that there's a lot of deferrals, especially if you have an SBA loan. The deferral was automatic. And I know Robert's done a ton of that in his group. And, so those are a couple of the basic types of things in terms of that. But there's also ways in which maybe you're not just fully laying off your staff, but looking at ways in which you're able to reduce reduce the hours of your staff and kind of be able to spread that out. And then also to be able to then find out ways to revamp some of your volunteer staff and see how they're able to work. Maybe it's people that are on reduced hours or are unable to work. Maybe there's new and innovative ways they're able to volunteer and assist you with some of those operations.
Anyone else? Yes, Robert. Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways, thank you, appreciate it. I agree with what Danny said. One of the nonprofits that I sit on the board of up in the Bay Area, they have rethought the way they're going to do work now, and they're going to save a great amount of money in office space. So they are going to move away from having an office. I think we had 6 or 7 people on staff, and I don't know how many square feet we had, but they're going to go into a co-working space and have maybe weekly meetings and get together when they can. But they really cut expenses a lot by moving and working from home. Again, what Danny said was good. And then again, some of the nonprofits I sit on, they really upped their outreach, not only to the traditional people that make grants, but to individuals. Not everybody's unemployed. There's people that are working very hard and actually making money at this point in time. So there's a lot of outreach to individuals. And then finally, and I think everybody that's on here did this, is you utilize staff in unique ways. We had our marketing people working on closing loans. You had, all hands on deck. You had people doing jobs that they generally weren't doing. And so they utilized staff. So if you had a PPP and you brought people back and maybe they couldn't do the job that they were doing in the past, they're being very creative. There's a nonprofit in Texas I know who got some of their staff and they were writing thank you letters. Then they weren't involved at all in the grant positions, but they were outreaching to to potential funders and writing thank you notes. So you need to be very creative in these times.
Sounds good. Todd, did you have a comment? I saw
Yeah,
your hand.
just a real quick one. Much of it's been touched upon, all great suggestions, but many nonprofits carry long-term debt that they had on the books prior to the pandemic. So I think it's a great opportunity to go to those lenders and look for loan modifications, longer-term loan modifications that would help them out of the situation. And I think the lenders would be receptive to that. But quite often, Dr. Weber, will find small businesses, nonprofits are reluctant to do so. They need to ask and not wait for the lender to come to them.
Sounds good. Jacob, was your hand up? I didn't see that. Okay, no problem. And in which case do you suggest nonprofits look at grants as opposed to loans and vice versa? That seems to be one of the questions that they often ask is it better to get a grant or is it better to get a loan or what should I do? What yes, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, grants are the best thing that you can get typically, depending on the conditions that you have. A grant you don't have to pay back, but if you get a loan through your bank, you're gonna have to pay that back with some interest. But yeah, without a doubt, as long as there's no overt restrictions with the grant, I'd definitely say go for a grant versus a loan.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
So Dr. Weber, what we have done with all the philanthropists who have funds at the San Diego Foundation, we have said to them, if you don't want to put your dollars into the Community Response Fund, then in your work with nonprofits, convert as many of your grants as you can to general operating support to help these nonprofits through these times. For the San Diego Foundation, we have also said to those who've got grants from us and are working through them, that if you need these dollars just for general operating support, go ahead and use them in that capacity. And what I would suggest to nonprofits, if you do have grants that are fairly restricted with funders who have given them to you, please go back to them just as you might to a lender and ask them if they could use those dollars for general operating support.
Okay. Anyone else? Sounds good. Nonprofits with over $1 million, some of the small folks complain that nonprofits with over $1 million in revenue have been far more successful in securing loans and grants. Why is this the case, and what can smaller organizations do to be more successful in this realm? Yeah.
I'll take that with because I'll relate it to businesses in the same vein. I think number one is make sure your finances are completely in order. It is the same that were some of the issues early on with the lending for EIDL and PPP. We spent a lot of time helping small businesses get their finances in order, and we've done the same for smaller nonprofits. Is make sure you have your finances in an easy to use fashion. You have it at your fingertips, and you're able to really have them organized and put together. I think that's not top of the list, is spend the time, spend the money, the effort on having those organized, because then that's going to be critical for any type of funder, be it a lender or a grantor. They're going to need that type of information. And so I think the ones that are over $1 million have had to spend that because they fall into the audit requirements. And so I think that, that's really why they've had a greater level of success. So I think some others can certainly talk to that as well.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? How should nonprofits go about, as you point out, reevaluating their financial relationships with their banks, their funders, and others, those that they serve? How can they go about better, basically reevaluating their current financial situation? And I think that's one of the challenges. Jacob, yes. You want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I thought I already did. And kind of coming back to what Danny was saying as well, in regards of, organizations with more than $1 million in revenue, and this is one of the key components that every nonprofit should be looking at right now is who are you working with at the bank level? That's been probably the biggest driver of who successfully got PPP funds, and it's also going to be the biggest driver of success of people getting financing during these times. You need to work with a banker or someone at a credit union that truly understands the nonprofit world, that can read your financials, understands your mission, because it's not the same as looking at a normal business. You know, when you're looking at a normal business, there's a different structure. You typically have guarantors on there. So again, the number one piece is again looking at who you work with. And then second, you know, you got to keep in mind when you go to any financial institution, and specifically if you're applying for a financing transaction, that institution is going to be looking to see how are we going to get paid back. If we give you $100,000, $200,000 in funds, they're going to look through your financial statements, and they're going to want to understand that. So you're going to have to be prepared to explain, you know, where your revenue comes from, where your donations come from. You know, how are they going to be in the future, to explain that to your banker or the person that you're working with. And again, you want someone who can understand that with you as well. So those are some of the key pieces I think nonprofits should be looking at right now when they're examining their banking relationship.
Okay. Anyone else? Robert. Mm-hmm.
So completely agree with Danny and Jacob. And I think, you know, Todd said it earlier, you should have multiple relationships, not just one relationship. And, you know, I know there's lenders, we're a lender, but if you had a bank and the bank did not give, if you were a nonprofit and had a relationship with your bank and went for a PPP and they didn't give you a PPP, I'd go start talking to another bank or another lender or a credit union to help you out on that. And then at the end, and your other question, it came down to really economics. We've done, of our 3,000 loans, hundreds have been under $10,000. Dr. Weber, we're not making any money on those loans that we did. We did a loan for $300 to a small business in San Francisco. It cost us, you know, way more to process that loan. So a lot of it is, and this is where the nonprofits can be partners with us, is on the advocacy side, is telling the government and the SBA saying, hey, if you want the banks and the nonprofits to do these loans under $10,000, then there needs to be a kicker in there for them. Somehow they need to be compensated for that. We did it as a nonprofit mission lender, but I'm usually not very sympathetic with the banks, but I can understand why they weren't doing it, because they were losing money on them. So you go up where you're going to make money first. So the message to the nonprofits is get to know your lender, get to know your banks, but also get to know your lending nonprofit partners in whatever community that you're in.
Okay, sounds great. Anyone else? Yes, Todd.
So just to take off on both of those things, there's a lot of great lenders out there, but lenders are not technical assistance providers, nor are they acting as financial advisors for the small businesses and the nonprofits when it comes to making a deal. And so I think they need to know that. The lenders are acting through the lens of their own risk. That's what they're primarily concerned with. Yet we find many nonprofits, many small businesses that come to us solely base what they're doing on our advice. And I just don't think that's a great practice. They don't always mesh. And that's where that technical assistance, surrounding yourself with a team, somebody that knows the legal side, the accounting side, and it's tough for the small businesses, the small nonprofits to do so, but get that team of support to help you with that assistance.
Where would they find these teams? I mean, who should they call? Who should they look to put together a team for them? I mean, oftentimes these are folks with good hearts and good desires and work very, very hard, but are unfamiliar with some of the strategies that they should be using, as well as the team. Robert, you have a comment? Yes.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. So right now, I'm going to assume, I haven't been on their site, but I'm going to assume Mark's site has a lot of resources on his. Ours does. If you go to cdcloans.com, we have a resource page. Our partner, Acción San Diego, who Mark mentioned earlier, they've got a dynamic resource page where you can get a lot of this. And the UT, our local paper, just did an article on this, that the San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program is offering up to 45 minutes of free legal advice to both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. So right now, a lot of folks are stepping up and providing guidance, and there's resources out there.
Sounds great. Anyone else? Danny.
Yeah. So Dr. Young, she kicked us off, but I'll give them a shout out. The Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego has a lot of great resources. That's also why we've partnered with them and have provided them some additional funding to be able to provide that for nonprofits. Of course, we provide that technical assistance day in, day out. That's what the SBA and the state funds us to do. We've provided literally thousands upon thousands of hours for thousands of small businesses in the last 75 days. But the Nonprofit Institute, they have some fantastic resources. I know coming up here in a couple of weeks, they have their nonprofit academy that they're doing, but on their website, they really have some awesome resources that can help nonprofits.
Sounds great. Anyone else? Okay. Well, our time is almost up for our conversation. So I'm going to give each one of you a minute or so to tell a little bit more, the one thought that as you're thinking about what would you really want to say to the nonprofits that are out there trying to figure it all out, trying to get it done, and are just sometimes overwhelmed with so much stuff coming out. They can't, they don't know where to turn. So I want to give each one of you just a 1 minute opportunity to say something to them that you think would be most important and most helpful. We can start with Todd at the top of my screen. And if you can take 30 seconds to a minute, that would be great.
Well, lots of great conversation. Again, thank you for having us here, and lots of great advice. But I think the one thought I have is be careful when you take on debt. PPP starts out as debt, and it can be forgiven, of course, if they meet certain requirements. And I noticed in the study that was provided from USD that there was a lot of caution from the respondents to that survey on taking debt. And I think that's good advice. And it may sound weird coming from a lender, but be very, very careful when taking on any debt.
Okay, sounds great. Anyone else want to add to Mark? Want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Weber. So about 2 weeks ago, I met a young man at Reality Changers named Salvador Bravo, who overcome many, many obstacles to see a great life beyond the one that he was living in Barrio Logan. And when I asked him, what has helped carry you through, or what will you take with you to UC Berkeley when you start on a mechanical engineering curricula and major soon? And he said, one of the things they teach us at Reality Changers is a quote from Robert Schuller that goes, "Tough times don't last, tough people do." And that for everyone to remember that while these are just some unprecedented times, we will get through that. And some of the best things they can do is stay true to their mission, stay true to their donors and their purpose, and you will weather this storm.
Thank you. Robert, you want to chime in with anything as a closing comment?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Weber. And I echo what Mark just said. And the other one is, if you're not an advocacy organization and you don't see yourself as an advocacy organization, you have to be one. You have to advocate for whatever your core mission is for your constituents. This is the most important time. And the biggest concern I have is that the communities that a lot of us fight for are being left behind in these budgetary actions. And I know, Dr. Weber, you take a leadership role on that, but you need the backing of people in your district and back in the county saying this is important and sharing their stories and doing advocacy. Advocacy is different now, right? I was on one with a California Hispanic Chamber. It's all done like this, but it's very important amongst everything that you're trying to do as a nonprofit leader, that is one of the things that you stay focused in on. Sounds
great. Danny, you have a comment?
I do. First, I actually want to start out by saying thank you to all the nonprofits and the hard work that you do. As someone who's been, we're doing it on the front lines from the small businesses. I know it's an isolating experience doing all of this virtually, and the hard work, you make a difference in your communities. And I want to say thank you. The other one is I think this is also the time now to break every silo you could ever imagine, to work together, find those shared avenues and shared things to be able to maximize the resources that you have. Work together, where you have shared missions, shared values, shared visions, to come together and really help your communities, help all of our communities, because that's where we're really going to make a difference, and we're going to make the California economy even better.
Jacob, any comments as we close out this portion?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, the nonprofit community is always in need for, the San Diego County, but now it's needed even more. And I think one of the big challenges that you always have is that unless you're involved in that community, you're actually seeing what's going on. You don't realize the need out there during those good times. And so we're entering, unfortunately, most likely a recessionary period where some of those things are going to be highlighted. And so I think this is actually a very good opportunity for nonprofits to go out and speak to the people in the community, speak to donors, high net worth individuals, because they're seeing what's going on in the community right now. And there are people out there that want to help and give back. And with it being so visible right now, again, I think you're going to have opportunities that you're just not going to have under normal circumstances. So again, it's challenging times, but also try to look on the bright side of things and get out there and try to expand your organization and expand your donor base.
Well, thank you all so very much. I'll take this opportunity to thank the Nonprofit Institute of University of San Diego, for all the work they've been doing with us and helping, and the data they've been collecting and helping to get the panelists together. I want to thank our panelists for your time that you're willing to put into this to help our nonprofits. I have to thank my staff. Franklin and Edmund have been worked very hard. Franklin Porter and Edmund Perkins are the masterminds of this and put it all together for my staff. So I want to thank them so much for their hard work and the things that they've done. We're now going to do something unique and break out into separate breakout sessions with the 5 individuals who are here. And what you need to do, and the purpose of that is for them to not only to hear you, to get some of your questions answered, but also for you to make contact for future efforts and future work, because we know this is not going to be the be all end all of it. This is a continuation of what we need to do to make sure our nonprofits are surviving. So if you will, you can go to our chat box, and there are links in the chat box that will lead you to the workshop area that you're supposed to be attending. So my staff tells me that it really works, and our panelists have been given information about how to do the link. But I want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing. It's extremely important work. And as we come through this pandemic, as you pointed out, it's all of us and none of us. I mean, it's really everybody helping everybody. And sometimes, when you're in a situation like this, there's so many horrible things happening around the world around you, you sometimes forget to see the good stuff that's happened. And even in the midst of this, there's still some good things happening. There are people helping people they've never helped before. Our environment is cleaner because we're not driving as much, and all these things. And even my sister, who doesn't do technology, has an iPad because she has to go to church and Bible class on the internet. And so the woman with the flip phone that's $19.95 for what she pays a month has now gotten herself a smartphone and an iPad. So hallelujah for that. But it all brings us to the reality that there will always be some good stuff. And as you pointed out, there are hard times, there are tough times, but tough people get through it. And we are people who are tough and can get through it. So once again, thanks to all of our nonprofits that have joined us, over 100 folks who are going to be clicking off and going into these sessions. But I want to thank my staff, and most importantly, thank those of you who've taken the time to be with me this afternoon to share this information and to help our nonprofits. Thanks so very much, and stay safe and be good.
Thank you, Dr. Weber.
You're welcome.